Today's episode is brought to you by HERdacity. HERdacity is a nonprofit inspiring confidence in women to achieve their professional goals. For resources, networking opportunities, and a strong community of women, visit HERdacity.org to learn more.
Welcome to HERdacious, a podcast for audacious women. A warm greetings to you all. This is HERdacious, the podcast for audacious women looking to make some career moves. And HERdacious is the podcast to help you in that journey. My name is Lorelei Gonzalez, and I am the happy host of the show. And today, we're going to be talking about ending the habit of overtalk. And to assist in this excellent conversation piece we have for you is a compassionate listener and graceful facilitator of team dynamics, the Director of Organizational Performance for Endeavor Management, Barbara Stewart.
Hey there, great to see you.
I am really excited to talk about ending the habit of overtalk. Barbara, to get us started in this conversation, I first want you to share with our listeners why you are so passionate about helping folks master effective communication.
Yeah, every time I sit down with business leaders and ask where they need the most help, what I hear about is communication. And communication is this huge, broad subject. We're not going to touch on all aspects of it today. But the one area that each and every one of us can control from starting right now is how many words we use to get our point across. And if we're victim of using way too many of them, we're diluting that point. And to be a leader, to be seen as a leader, to be contributing in the organization, we need to be concise in our communication.
All right, help us get concise in our communication. What is overtalk?
So think about it this way. Do you remember the first time that you heard yourself recorded?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And you probably thought, oh my gosh, I sound like that. Maybe you had a high-pitched voice, or maybe like me, I spoke real slowly because I grew up in East Texas. It was a surprise. But one of the other things you may have heard in there is, oh my gosh, it took me 10 minutes to make that point. And that's what we mean by overtalk. Is it a point that can be made succinctly and quickly, gets drug out, and so the meaning is completely lost?
Why do people overtalk or over-explain themselves?
There are many reasons why. We're going to focus on three today. The first is that we process out loud. It's a normal, natural way of thinking and sharing our thoughts out loud. Number two, we think it adds to credibility. We overtalk, thinking that the more we have the floor, the more credible we are. And then number three, we feel like we haven't been listened to. So the first one we process out loud is truly that. Someone asks us a question, or we're involved in a brainstorming session, and we're like, well, as I think about that, and we share our thoughts out loud with the group. And that can be fine if it's with your immediate team, but if you're in a bigger setting, like maybe sitting across the table from clients or shareholders or something like that, they don't need to be part of every thought that you're processing in that moment. When we look at the second one, which is that we think it adds to credibility, it's that whole point of having the floor. So the more my voice is heard, because we often hear, and particularly as women, we hear that we aren't heard enough. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that comes from a lower pitch projection that we have. We aren't loud enough. And then sometimes it's simply because we don't speak up. And so we err on the other side of thinking, as long as I have the floor, I'm going to keep talking because that adds to my credibility. And the third point, when we feel like we haven't been listened to and we find someone that listens to us, oh my goodness, they hear everything that we have not had a friend or space or time to share. And that can be really dangerous for our careers. If we're sharing too much if we're talking too much, people are going to avoid us. And if we overshare in a situation with a client, we're not going to be invited back.
It could be seen as unprofessional.
Absolutely.
Well, in your professional opinion, which one of those do you think is the most challenging to break from?
I think that last one, that we haven't been listened to, because it is unique. When we think about the world that we live in and how much our communication now is through this video screen or it's through a text, that we aren't often listened to. And so when we find someone that listens to us, boy, what a treat that is.
How does over-explaining or over-talk hurt us on our career trajectory?
Yeah. So we'll start with your team, the people that you work with. And as a team, you're supposed to be collaborating and working together on things. But every time that you engage with someone, they know, oh, Barbara asked for a 30-minute meeting. I better make it an hour because it will take that long to get through all of the conversation. And not all of that conversation is helpful. So you may find that your teammates actually avoid those kinds of meetings, and then you're left out of that team collaboration because there's nothing short with you. Take it to the next level, and working with your boss, the same thing may happen, right? We all would like more immediate feedback in the work that we're doing. But if your boss has come to know that every time I go talk to Barbara, it's 30 minutes, they're not going to be coming to have those kinds of conversations because they can't break away. So again, you're left out, you don't get the feedback you need, and they look and see someone that they can't move into a position because of the excess talking, the overtalk. When we overtalk, the other thing that it creates is it devalues what we're saying.
What do you mean?
So, well, if something could be said in 2 sentences and you take 20, you've left the person out there figuring out, of those 20 sentences, which ones do I need to pay attention to?
Oh, yeah. Creates confusion.
Exactly. What was the most important point in what you shared? Another point around this is we're there in that one-way conversation, and we took 20 sentences to explain something that could have been explained in 2, then we don't have the confidence to shorten that down. It's kind of like a vicious circle.
We start doubting the validity of what we're saying, so we just keep trying to explain it further.
There you go.
All right. Well, to keep following this trail for another moment or so, because this podcast is specifically aimed towards women, how does over-explaining something or the habit of overtalk specifically affect women?
There are a lot of people that have a hard time with talking more. There may be a perception that women talk more, and therefore, when it happens, it gets noticed. Whereas with other people who we don't perceive as being over-talkers, and that would be men in this case, we don't notice when it happens because we're not expecting it to happen.
Because it's normalized.
Yes.
Right, okay. All right, well, we're going to take this quick moment for a sponsor break. We will be right back.
Hi, Barbie here from Moonray, husband and wife indie pop duo. If you enjoy the intro music, we invite you to listen to our debut EP, Honeymoon, streaming now on all platforms. Visit www.moonray-music.com for more.
And we're back talking with Barbara Stewart about overtalk. So Barbara, how can we identify that overtalk or overexplanation is a problem for us?
This can be tricky because the overtalker feels quite confident in their communication skills. They actually think they're a great communicator a majority of the time.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah. So it can be a real blind spot for people. So if you're looking to identify it, it just takes some close introspection, but you might notice, do your teammates avoid you?
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. It's rather harsh, but if you want to have that 30-minute meeting, are you finding that there's not much time on their calendar? Or you have the meeting and, oh my goodness, there's a call that they have to jump on, right? That there's something that forces them at the end of the meeting, at the end of the 30 minutes, to have to be somewhere else very quickly. Another phone call, another meeting, which is quite acceptable in these days that we have back-to-back calls, back-to-back meetings. But you might want to pay attention to that. And of course, the great escape is, I've really got to go to the restroom.
Oh.
Right?
Classic get out of jail free card. Yeah.
Exactly. So being aware of those kinds of signals. Now, again, they can be very subtle and it could be hard for you to pick up on. The best thing to do is ask for this kind of feedback.
From who?
Ask a friend. Always great to start there. And hopefully it's a friend that would tell you the truth. Ask a colleague. We all have trusted colleagues at work, so find that one that you feel comfortable with and ask them that question. And then, yes, you do want to ask your supervisor, your boss, for that kind of feedback.
All right, so let's say we've done that, and we have identified ourselves of being guilty of the occasional overtalk experience. What can we do to start self-correcting?
Colleagues and your close teammates are a wonderful place to start. And in fact, if you're confident enough, and I encourage you to do this, is ask for their help, right? Share with them, this is something I'm working on. This is part of my growth plan for this year. I'm working on being more succinct in my conversations, and I would appreciate your help.
That's nice and clear.
We all love to help. Yeah, and that would be the best place, that immediate team group that you have to get that kind of feedback. The other things that you can do are when you're preparing for a meeting with someone other than those teammates, maybe it's with a client, maybe it's with the boss or another colleague, is to prepare for the meeting. A lot of us like to wing things. Say, I'm more natural when I just, go in there and speak off the cuff. Yes, when you go in there and speak off the cuff, you keep speaking and speaking and speaking because you haven't thought about the point that you wanted to get across. Prepare for those conversations. What is the point that I need to make? What is the resolution that we need to get? Whatever the focus of that conversation, and then think about what it's going to take for you to communicate that in as few of words as possible. A great way to progress in your career is also to engage a coach to help with this. So I've shared some things that ask you to be confident and reach out to your team and ask for their help. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us, frankly, aren't there, right? We're not in a place that we're that confident to ask for that help from people that we work with. And so you can ask from a professional coach, a coach that can help you put together just the kind of strategy that I described. When working with people on this not so great habit of over-talking, we ask them to get more precise with their language. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you're using bigger words or words that are confusing to others. It's just that you're more precise. There are fewer words. If you're having a bit of discomfort with that, what you can always do is ask the audience, right? Was I clear? Did you understand what I was sharing?
Right.
Right? And that's a really good cue because, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's a one-way conversation. With the overtalker, it's pretty much always a one-way conversation.
Yeah.
And so for us to pause and say, oh, was I clear, or do you need more information? Turns the conversation over to them.
That's a really great tactic because that helps remove an assumption that you either have to keep going or that they don't understand what you're saying, which is why I think many people might be over-talking in the first place. Let me just keep going with this thought because you don't look like you know what's going on yet. All right. Well, I want to hone in on that succinct language, that language precision for a moment. How might we develop our ability to be more precise in our words? I mean, you mentioned practicing. You mentioned getting a coach. Are there certain tricks that we can build into ourselves, into our patterns of behavior to catch ourselves doing it?
So a lot of times we feel that when we're in a conversation and we're asked a question or we're expected to contribute in some way, that we need to respond immediately. This goes back to the beginning where I talked about processing out loud.
Mm-hmm.
A great habit that we can get into is to take a pause before we speak. It's hard for people to do. They want to jump right in there and make their point, make sure that they're heard, or make sure they have the floor. But if we can take a pause, then we can condense what we need to say, make our point in fewer words.
But that means people have to be comfortable with silence, with taking a moment of silence. And I don't think that a lot of folks are comfortable with silence in professional communication or even personal communication.
You are right. And how about that silent pause I just gave you?
It was well played. Well played, man.
Yes, you're right. It's a challenging thing to learn, that pause. And it goes both directions. So we're the overtalker, right? But we've recognized, I have that awareness. I'm overtalking. Let me stop and ask if the person needs additional information. So we stop and we ask. And then what do? We wait for their answer.
Oh, we don't infer some stuff or like offer some other feedback or like mention that other thing that we did the other day or whatever it is to fill in the space?
Nope. We don't jump back in until the other person responds.
Love it. It makes me think of Parkinson's law, where a thing will expand to fill the allowable time. So if a meeting is supposed to last for an hour and we finished in 30 minutes, well, gosh, surely there must be something else for us to talk about.
Surely. Yes. Or maybe I could have 30 minutes back, right?
Novel idea.
Yeah.
Novel. All right. Well, when we're developing our own professional skill sets, we tend to start noticing these challenges in others. So what happens if we notice one of our peers or our colleagues over-talking and we want to help them course correct? How do we reach out in a kind and helpful way that doesn't make folks feel defensive?
Yes. We can take this a couple of different ways. I'm going to take the kind and gentle way first, and that this is a colleague that we care about, that's part of our team, that we want to see succeed.
All right.
So perhaps the conversation is over lunch and just talking about career goals and things that we're both working on. And so you establish an environment of trust. You establish this environment of sharing what you're working on, and maybe that allows the other person to share. And then maybe in that kind of conversation, you can share, there is something I've observed, and in fact, I dealt with it a little bit early on in my career, and I think this might be helpful for you.
I loved how you built the connection between I struggled with this too. That allows for the empathy.
Yes.
It's nice. All right. So you gave us the kind version. I imagine there's a little more, less subtle way to do it.
Yes, there is. And you have to, again, be aware of who you're working with or talking with in this particular situation. Mm-hmm. But you may be able to say to the person, Sherry, every time we get together, the conversations go much longer than either of us have planned for. And I think we can be a little bit more concise in our communication. Do you think that's something that we could work on together?
Ooh, I like it.
It was still nice, wasn't it?
It was succinct and clear, and you didn't have to over-explain what you were saying.
What's interesting about giving feedback around this, because again, most people don't see it. They don't hear it, that they're over-talkers. And it's hard for people to want to correct that. And it's particularly hard. The resource that I shared with you, where research has been done, there's not a whole lot of research on over-talkers, but it is out there. And what they found is that even supervisors are reluctant to give this kind of feedback. So I would say, one, for those of you out there that are listening that are supervisors, get comfortable with this. Get comfortable with helping your people be more succinct in their communication. And if you're not getting feedback from your supervisor, ask for it. Go in prepared. Go in with your list of what do I want to know about my career trajectory and how I need to change and grow, and go in and ask for that feedback. Ask about your communication skills.
Awesome. All right, Barbara. Lastly, share some resources for our listeners to continue their educational journey.
Yeah. One of the best resources that I have personally experienced is Toastmasters. Mm-hmm. Toastmasters has been around for a very long time and for a very good reason. They help people become leaders. If you're not getting that kind of development in the workplace that you're in, seek out Toastmasters. You'll learn how to speak on your feet. You'll learn how to lead. You'll learn how to be more concise in your language. Multi-purpose. You'll get so many benefits from just that one resource that you tap into and attend regularly.
Awesome.
There are a few others out there. As I was looking for resources, I was amused to find that our government has a website called plainlanguage.gov.
Really?
And this is more, yes. This is more around the written word, and I know it is surprising because a lot of the things we get from the government don't seem to be in plain English. However, there is an organization out there that provides examples, writing examples, title examples around plain language. So the last resource is that research paper that I mentioned, and I know you have the link to that to share with the listeners if they want to dig deeper into compulsive talkers.
Compulsive talkers. All right. Yes, all three of those resources will be listed in our show notes for those of you who do, in fact, want to dig deeper. Now, speaking of digging real deep and going for the gold, the Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympics have come to an end. Maybe you caught a glimpse of Olympic diver Tom Daley knitting, or discovered several sports you didn't even know were sports, like artistic swimming or badminton or sport climbing, all of which makes more sense in being classified as a sport than golf. Yeah, I said that. Whether you're a devout follower of the games, have been keeping up with bits and pieces of it here or there, or opt out of it altogether, I'm sure you have gained at least some tiny takeaway from this summer's premier sports event. So today's Femme Fact is a quick recap of just a handful of the women from around the globe who broke records and constraints on a world stage. During week 1 of the Olympics, weightlifter Heidelin Diaz of the Philippines won a gold medal in women's weightlifting, making her the first person in 100 years to win a gold medal for any event for the Philippines. She also broke an Olympic record, lifting 493 pounds in 2 combined lifts. Also in week 1, Japan's Abe Hifumi and Abe Uta became the first and only brother-sister duo to both win Olympic gold medals in the same sport on the same day, and that sport was judo. Could you imagine the childhood brawls between 2 siblings who would grow up to become Olympic gold medalists in judo? Good gracious. Well, over in the realm of sports that I will never try my hand at unless I want to break every bone in my body, we have BMX freestyle rider Chelsea Wolfe. Chelsea made history this summer as the first out transgender athlete from Team USA to go to the Olympics. Wolfe hopes that her participation will inspire young trans girls from around the world to believe in themselves and to know that they can accomplish anything too. In the world of water polo, Team USA water polo player Maggie Steffens set a record for the most goals scored by an individual player in their Olympic career history, having scored 49 goals throughout her Olympic tenure. And when we're talking about the water, we can't not talk about Katie Ledecky, who claimed 2 golds and 2 silvers at the Summer Games for a whopping 10 Olympic medal total, 7 of which are gold. Now, Tokyo 2020 marked skateboarding's debut as a sport in the Summer Olympics, and the 3 young medalists showed the world that with each successive generation, young people are becoming terrifyingly more talented. Sakura Yosuzumi of Japan, Kokona Hiraki, also of Japan, and Sky Brown of Great Britain won gold, silver, and bronze, respectively, in skateboarding. Sky, who was 13 years old, became Great Britain's youngest medalist ever, and Kokona, who is 12 years old, accompanies Sky as being one of the youngest medalists since 1936. The 19-year-old gold medal winner Sakura Yosuzumi, first woman ever to win gold in skateboarding, divulged to reporters that most of her training took place in her own backyard, because apparently in Japan there are so few skate parks that her family had to build one at their house in order for her to practice. Over in track and field, Yulimar Rojas of Venezuela broke the 1995 world record in the triple jump this year with a whopping, and get this, 15.67 meter jump. That's 51 friggin' feet, y'all. She won Venezuela's only gold medal at this year's Olympics. Now, staying with track and field, I know you know the name of Allison Felix. Like, you gotta know. This famous Team USA sprinter just became the most decorated American track and field star in all of Olympic history, eclipsing Carl Lewis's previous record of 9 total medals. Felix, who finished out the 2020 Games with 11 total medals from her 5 Olympic appearances, capped off her season with a gold medal in the 4x400 meter relay alongside teammates Sydney McLaughlin, Delilah Muhammad, and Uthing Mo. Allison dedicated her efforts to her daughter Cameron, who she'd given birth to in 2018, because the now 11-medal Olympian had garnered some blowback for choosing motherhood in concert with her sports career. Most notably, Felix was sponsored by Nike for years, and when her contract expired and she was negotiating a new one while pregnant, Nike asked her to be the face of a new women's empowerment campaign they were launching. Now, Felix attempted to negotiate said contract to include maternity protections post-pregnancy, and Nike chose to deny maternity protections and, get this, offered a 70% pay cut too. So she bounced and started her own brand. But I want to share a powerful quote from the op-ed she wrote about her Nike experience. Protection during maternity isn't just limited to Olympians. Working women all over the United States deserve protection when they have children. We shouldn't have to rely on companies to do the right thing. Our families depend on it. Now, in another emotional Team USA win, gymnast Suni Lee won gold in the women's gymnastics all-around event, making her the first Hmong American to represent on the United States Olympic team and to win a gold medal. But Simone Biles is likely the Olympic highlight that most of us are familiar with. Simone Biles, the 24-year-old United States gymnast hailing from Houston, is objectively the most decorated gymnast in history, with 32 Olympic and World Championship medals, and subjectively, but not subjectively, possibly the greatest gymnast of all time. Simone withdrew midway through the team competition because her mental health was suffering, experiencing what gymnasts call the twisties, which can be life-threatening when performing Olympian-level gymnast moves. She had qualified for all 6 gymnastic events, but only returned to the competition in the final individual balance beam event, where she happily won bronze. Being one of the most prominent athletes in gymnastics, the Olympics, and, dare I say, the world, Simone's actions sparked international conversations about the relationship between mental health, physical health, and the athletes themselves. Athletes are becoming more adamant about vocalizing on the taboo of mental health conversations in sports, as they are often expected to put their mental health on the back burner for the sake of their competition. But this comes at a cost. And Simone's display of courage, discipline, and self-advocacy exemplified to all athletes that it is perfectly okay, and in fact necessary, to prioritize your mental health and thus your person. Especially if you're doing something like somersaulting through the air or sprinting your muscles into failure. I imagine most of us would feel a little concerned for our safety in moments like those. I mean, unless you're a golfer. Yeah, golfer. As the delayed Tokyo Games demonstrated, there is no shortage of capable women, nor will there ever be. With the summer 2024 Paris Games projected to have exact gender balance of participants, the first Olympic Games to ever do so, we expect many more great leaps forward for women. So whatever you're up to in the next few years, know that all of us here at HERdacous will be rooting for you to take home the gold. Now, Barbara, you were absolutely golden with us today, and we so appreciate your time and your expertise. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for us as we leave this conversation?
Yeah. How about a quote?
Please.
To help us think about succinct conversations. Thomas Jefferson once said, the most valuable of all talents is that of never using 2 words when one will do.
Excellent. And so we shall. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yes. Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in. Remember, episodes drop every Monday. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. That super helps our show. And you are also welcome to rate and review us. That also helps our show. And you can drop me a line, HERdacious at HERdacity.org. That will also be linked in our show notes. Until next time, my name is Lorelei. This was HERdacious. Go out there and go for the gold, fam. The end.